We're live.
Thank you. Good evening. Welcome to the September meeting of Mahone Bay Town Council. We have most of our councilors here tonight. We do have regrets from Councilor Nell, and we have our neighbors and citizens at home who are watching us on YouTube. I will begin the meeting by reminding us that we are gathered today in Mi'kmaq, the ancestral, present, and future territory of the Mi'kmaq people. We gather with the intent followed by the living peace and friendship treaties with respect, cooperation, and coexistence. And we are thankful for that opportunity. Council, you have an agenda that we'll call the meeting to order officially. And you have an agenda that was emailed to you. What is your wish with the agenda? Councilor Carver?
I would like to make an amendment to the agenda with the addition of the letter that arrived today from Talking Trees that was addressed to the steering team of Plan Mahone Bay. And as advised by the clerk, the only way that we can get it to the members of the steering team is via a motion of council in terms of the time frame and the mechanics. So I'm asking to have that letter and consideration of that letter added to the agenda.
We would add that, and it's specifically to have a motion to pass it to the steering team.
Yes,
So
for council to consider that, yes.
Okay, so it would go in action items for consideration, correspondence action items.
Yeah, it could go there, yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
So do we have a seconder for the, did you have another thing, Councilor Carver? Did you have something else? No, okay. Councilor Burdick, you will second the motion to accept the agenda with the noted amendment. Okay, thank you. All in favor? Thank you, that motion is carried. Let's go to the minutes of the latest meetings that we had. I would note that my agenda has 2.1 special meeting July 28th, but when I click on the highlight, it goes to the minutes for July 29th. And when I click on the minutes for July 29th, it goes to the meeting for July 28th. So I would suggest if you want to deal with the meeting of July 28th, click on July 29th. What is your wish for the minutes of July 28th?
Mayor, I'd move that we approve the minutes of the special meeting of July 28th.
Okay. Do we have seconder? Councilor Carver? Okay. On the question, all in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. That's the minutes of the July 28th meeting. Let's go to the meeting of July 29th.
As well, Mayor, I'm happy to move that we approve the minutes of July 29th. That's the regular meeting.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Councilor Burdick who's there. Okay. You heard the motion. On the question. Councilor Carver, you have a comment?
I do. I'm sorry. I was having a hard time finding my unmute thing. I just one correction to the minutes in the section on the Heritage Advisory Committee. And we had this discussion at the Heritage Advisory Committee about the correct terminology for the standards and guidelines. And I believe the correct terminology is standards and guidelines for conservation of heritage resources. So it's just a small correction in the minutes of the minutes.
Okay. Councilor CAO.
Yeah, sorry, I'm not sure that this is really a correction to the minutes on my part, so I can wait until after the motion, but there was a piece of business that was missed at the last meeting. The clerk reminded me of, and it was pursuant to the council's review of the minutes of the Asset Management Committee that took place at this meeting. There were two resignations from the committee that were noted. And at the time, the committee acknowledged that they would like to thank those members for their service. It wasn't it was my oversight to not make that a motion. My understanding is typically when that information is received at council, council has made a motion acknowledging the resignation of the committee members. And that is the trigger to send them correspondence and thanks. And so I just wanted to call attention to that here. It maybe would be appropriate, since it wasn't in these minutes, to do it after we resolve these minutes, or perhaps there's another way that we could approach that. But it should have been included in the meeting on the 28th, and it was an oversight on my part not to request a motion at that time.
Well, perhaps if we were to treat that as an oversight, Mr. Hyde, and we could have the motion tonight, so it would become part of the minutes of tonight's meeting, it might be an easy way to resolve the oversight.
That, I think that would be great. That we can obviously vote on this motion on the minutes right now. And then I can note the two names of the resignations if somebody would like to make a motion.
Okay, thank you. So we're voting on the acceptance of the minutes of the regular meeting of July 29th. We've got a mover, we've got a seconder. All in favor? Thank you. And now CAO, the two names.
Yeah, so on the regular meeting of the Asset Management Committee for July, which was reported to council at the regular meeting of council at the end of July, we acknowledge the resignations of Lynn Henniger and Michael Blair from the Asset Management Committee.
All right, thank you. Council, we would entertain a motion to issue thank you to both Ms. Henniger and Mr. Blair for their consideration and time in participating in the Asset Management Committee. Councillor Carver makes the motion. Okay, and seconded by Deputy Mayor Kangata. You've heard the motion. On the question, all in favor? Motion is carried. Thank you, CAO. All right, then let's go, and the special meeting of August the 9th is the last one. And you actually get that when you click on the highlight. What did you wish for the August 9th meeting? There we go. Councillor Carver.
Everyone's so shy. I would move that the minutes of the August 9th meeting be accepted as distributed.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Burdick. Okay, you've heard the motion. On the question, all in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. Let's go to, we have no presentations. Let's go to correspondence for action. We have two items there. The first one is the letter from Michael Brown, representing the Royal Canadian Legion Branch 49, talking about enhancements to the town cenotaph. Councillor Feeney.
Mayor, over the last, I guess, 6 months, there have been a number of requests pertaining to the cenotaph from the Legion around beautification initiatives and flowers and the like. And there have been some discussions around safety issues. I do believe that this particular letter wouldn't fall into that category. As I understand it from speaking with a number of Legion members, this is more of a fixed tribute that would require limited and, if a few times a year care. So we wouldn't have a situation where we'd have people there watering a flower bed on a day-to-day basis. I know everyone on council is well aware of the safety issues around the cenotaph. If you had people in the cenotaph performing maintenance work on any regular basis. So, and we've talked about that as a council from time to time over the last few months. So because that isn't an issue here, I'd be pleased to move that we support this request and move this along.
Okay, thank you. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Carver, seconds. Thank you. On the question, comments? Do we know what this will add to the size of the footprint at the cenotaph? It sounds like some sloping stone. It's going to come out a certain amount beyond the current size, or will it fit within the curbing perimeter as now established? CAO?
Well, I don't know because I haven't been back on long enough to follow up with them about it. They do note, and I just wanted to call attention to the fact that any designs would still come back to council for approval. So I think what they're seeking right now is approval to apply for those funds, conditional on council's approval of any final design that they do come up with.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? You've heard the motion. On the question. All in favor? Motion is carried. Let's go to correspondence for action number 2, the letter from Talking Trees. Councillor Carver.
Yes, if I may, thank you. The letter from Talking Trees is addressed to the members of the steering team for the Plan Mahone Bay project. And because of the timing of the meeting, this comes at the last minute. And because of the organizational accountabilities, this had to go through council before going directly to the members of the steering team. And the letter is addressing issues that the Talking Trees members would hope that the members of the steering team would be aware of, issues that council have been aware of because of prior communications with council. But the assumption is that the citizen members of the steering team may not have that information. So the letter is really an attempt to bring people on an even playing field in terms of their awareness of the concerns that are being expressed or put forward by the Talking Trees. So with that in mind, I would like to move that council direct staff to forward this letter to the members of the steering team of the Plan Mahone Bay project.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Burdick? Just by the skin of your birthday teeth, Councillor Burdick, got that motion, that second in there. Okay, you've heard the motion. On the question. All in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. Okay, item number 5, correspondence information items. What is your wish, Council? Councillor Feeney?
Mayor, I'd move that we receive and file the lengthy list of correspondence from last month.
Okay, thank you. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Wilson seconds. Councillor Carver, please.
Yes, I just wonder if item 5.4 from Captain Boudreau with concerns about issues on Main Street might warrant a reply from staff. It seemed to me that the concerns being expressed were substantive enough that it might warrant a reply.
Okay, Councillor Burdick?
Yes, I had noted that also. And I also had noted later on in the staff report for point 17, there's a report that's forthcoming from the Traffic Authority. That might be good information to include in the response to Captain Boudreau, just to say that this is a forthcoming thing, so that these are concerns that are being considered.
Okay,
And does that
So-
require a motion? Yeah,
it should have a separate motion.
yeah,
So let's deal with the motion that's on the floor to
Yeah.
receive and file, notwithstanding Captain Boudreau's letter. All in favor? Motion's carried. We would now entertain a motion that staff respond to Captain Boudreau, the specific issues he is citing, and we would reference the traffic report, as Councillor Burdick has suggested, that is upcoming. Okay. Does someone wish to make that motion?
I see the deputy mayor has his hand up.
Deputy Mayor did indeed. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Carver? The motion has been moved and seconded. On the question. All in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you.
Mayor, if I may have a question about the correspondence. There were several messages from the NSFM referencing the Climate Change Leaders Award. And I wondered if that is something that Mahone Bay or the three counties who work together might put their names forward for that. I'm just asking
The
if
three
that-
counties who work together
Well,
for which,
the three municipalities sorry, I'm having a lapse here. Berwick and Antigonish. Whether that's something worth doing. I'm just, essentially it's a question for the CAO, I suppose, maybe for council too. Is that something we are interested in pursuing?
I think it certainly is of note, but we were recognized at the NSFM conference, I think it was 3 years ago, where Mahone Bay, Antigonish, and Berwick received a recognition award from NSFM for their work in particular with the wind farm as it relates to the environment. However, clerk, please.
I'd like to point out that the deadline to apply for the Climate Change Leader Award has passed. So that is not something that we can, yes.
We have a conversation about it with area most years, and as the mayor pointed out, we have been recognized before. So we figured we'd give other people a chance while we work on our next big thing, and then maybe the town belongs back there again soon.
Right, and the town itself could apply as well as an individual unit, because there's so much, we're doing so much in that regard. So thank you.
The clerk not only closes the lid on the subject, she sits on the lid. Deputy Mayor.
My apologies, I'm a bit slow tonight. With regards to the correspondence, and there's a letter there from Caroline Lones about low-income tax exemption. Do we just receive and file, or will you respond as we've responded to Captain Boudreau? And then the other question from my perspective is, don't we have any comments around, I guess, this, from my perspective, a curiously significant question that maybe in terms of our checks on who we give exemptions, whether we are doing, I guess, full due diligence, or we're just going through the motions, or sort of checking this number and then, but not figuring out somebody's actual need for exemptions and things like that.
Okay, CAO, would you like to speak to that? A resident number cruncher.
Well, Luke's the number cruncher, but he's not on here, so I'll fill in. We have a standard approach to verifying income for low income exemptions. There definitely are ways that people, have means other than the method that we're able to verify, which, uses federal reported income. There are all kinds of reasons why somebody may be better or worse off than their reported income. But we do have limited ability, and I think, rightly, to look into people's circumstances above and beyond that. So what we do is standard, and while there may be some cases where it could in some way be to the advantage of some individuals, I think broadly speaking, it's a fair approach. It's an objective approach. Not to say that council couldn't direct staff to look at the way that we do verify income, but I do think it is quite standard, and relies on federally reported information.
Thank you. Councillor Burdick.
Thank you. Out of curiosity, is it confidential information to say how many people or how many households are taking advantage of this particular program in the town? Not who, but just sort of a rough sense of the numbers of people involved. If you can't find that immediately, I'd still be
It's not
curious.
confidential information,
Okay.
but I'd have to get back to you on it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, CAO. Deputy Mayor.
So do I understand the I guess the need or desire to be standard, but I also know that standard processes do not necessarily cover the basis. And a resident has sort of suggested a very simple ad. Do you have question around? Do you own another property? If somebody chooses to not disclose, it's their piece. So I was wondering, is that something we can add to the questions we ask, so that at least that's covered?
Councillor Feeney.
Mayor, so I think, my understanding of the policy is that it's derived from our use of what was traditionally net income, line 15,000, now 150,000 on CRA on our tax filings. We haven't really looked at that, probably since it originally came in. I think the CAO makes a good point about you need to pick one line. It needs to be verifiable. I think we're all I think that is logical, but like the tax code has changed a lot, to the deputy mayor's point, and there are a lot of other tools in the toolbox now to make that number less meaningful. So, in the context of reviewing things to make sure that they are equitable and they continue to align, sometime, I think we can review that policy and put it on our list. Maybe we want to look at gross income versus net income versus gross income. I'm not sure which line we use, or, there might be another line within the tax filings that's more logical. I think that the letter and the deputy mayor make the point there are people that have very material income, but it's not necessarily reported, for a variety of reasons that I'm wholeheartedly support. But to the degree, I think, to Alice's point, unless we really understand how many people are participating, and is there something we could do as a council to make the policy more equitable? We're all kind of flying blind. So, we have an opportunity to review these things over the next couple of years, and maybe we should put this on our list.
On the policy and strategy committee's list?
I think there's information, and maybe we do nothing. Maybe we just leave it exactly the way it is now. But I think that's where the deputy mayor was heading. Let's look at it and see if that still makes sense.
Okay, Deputy Mayor, would you like to make a motion to refer this to the Policy and Strategy Committee for further discussion and review?
Yeah, I'd like to move that. And I guess the principle from which I'm coming from is a member of the public has sort of brought it to our attention, probably not on our radar. I think it's incumbent upon us to really dig a little bit deeper and see if there's something we can do there.
Okay. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Feeney seconds it. You've heard the motion. CAO, you have a comment?
Yeah, not to suggest that this shouldn't be referred to the committee, but just there's a very specific suggestion, as the deputy mayor pointed out, that's being made here. But obviously, low income exemption policy is something that is generally reviewed from time to time. Looking at the categories and comparing how that actually relates to income, what the actual circumstances of people is. So if this is a review that is just to look at the primary residence question, it could happen at any time. But I just wanted to suggest that we would undertake, I think, typically a review of this policy after new census, because it gives us an opportunity to look at whether those numbers and thresholds make sense. So I don't know if we want to put it on for once we have that, or with an understanding that that's going to be part of the discussion, or if we just want to focus in on the residence question. But I just wanted to raise that while we were in this opportunity.
So a friendly amendment that we would initiate the deputy mayor's motion for review when the new census data is available. Agreed? Councillor Feeney, you agree? Okay. So the motion is now that it will be referred for action to the Policy and Strategy Committee to be actioned once the information from the most recent census is available. Okay. You've heard the motion. On the question, all in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. Let's go to category 6, staff reports. This is the first report of the month. So this is the report point light, not the heavy duty one. Okay. CAO, please. Or do we have any questions for the CAO on the staff report? Councillor Burdick.
Thank you. I noted point 12 about the MBTCC and a revisiting talking about the renewed agreement, or a possible renewed agreement for the operation of the Visitors Information Center. And I think that was noted for September or October, and wondering if that can happen soon, or how that would happen if we have to reach out to them.
I can speak to that, Mr. Mayor.
Please.
So we had said that we would like to meet with the representatives of the chamber. Council would like to meet directly with representatives of the chamber, and the response was that they would like to postpone until such a time as it would not be, the height of business season. They wouldn't be busy with tourism. So I know that Deputy Mayor and I have a regular contact with the chamber, and we could certainly ask again, when do you think that time might be coming up? I would presume it would probably be after Thanksgiving, so mid-October at the soonest, but that's my presumption. Maybe they're in stride now and they'd have time now, so it doesn't hurt to ask.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I'm assuming that was Deputy CEO.
Yes, thank you, Francis. Yeah, we have Mo and I have a regular touch base with the chamber every couple of months. So,
okay, that was going to be my next question, Deputy Mayor. Over to you again, sir.
I was still wondering what new business I started on the side to be in contact with the chamber. There's one item that we talked about, a review. I think a review of the procurement policy. I think a last special meeting, and I did not see it on the list. I was assuming it's probably just an oversight. So wondering whether that's the case, or that's something different that you won't capture in this.
Forgive me, I'm just struggling to recall when the direction came and where it would have come up. Clerk, do you have any recollection. I agree that I'm sure that it is captured somewhere, but was that at strategy and policy or was that at council? Francis, you're on mute.
It was a special meeting of council that we held on July 28th. There was a motion to direct staff to produce a report on the town's procurement policy.
Okay, no, it definitely should be here then. And I guess where was the special meeting? It probably just was missed. So we'll pick that up in the September 30th version of this report. Thank you.
Thank you for pointing that out.
Okay. Other questions for the CAO? I noticed the notice is out CAO for the one-way street sign on Cherry Lane happening week after next, I think.
Yeah, I think the 29th was the
29th.
planned date, and we've got a little bit of prep work putting up poles and things so that the day of they can put out all the new signs and everything at once, because you wouldn't want to have half the work done and get called away to something else. So there'll probably be some poles without signs on them go up a little bit sooner, but the 29th is the go live for the change. And just should remind everyone that this is from this is Cherry Lane from Parish to Main, and doesn't include Parish from the intersection with Orchard Street down to Edgewater. We have talked about that section. We are putting up some signage indicating for trucks not to continue up Parish, heavy trucks not to continue up Parish, as they will not have an ability to turn adequately. So there will be a sign, or may already be a sign, saying no heavy trucks past basically where they could turn into the public parking lot there behind the church, giving them a last opportunity not to go up and get stuck. Now, not everyone will listen, but we're gonna have that sign up, but just as an extra precaution.
Okay. Deputy Mayor.
Apologies, I'm talking about this report a lot, but item 11, looking into traffic calming measures. If I remember right, the conversation was around at least doing that in concert with the bicycle route engagement process. And so I see there's a report on that today, but this still shows us 50%. So wondering what the disconnect is on that, and whether the plan is to still finalize this month, or it's something that will be delayed.
I'm happy to speak to that. I think that's just life getting in the way between my leave and Catherine's departure for returning to school. We've had a little bit of a hiccup there. So Catherine filed her final report on the engagement because she had completed it and wanted to get that in front of council. And I didn't have the opportunity to provide an accompanying report on what that says about traffic calming measures. And that will come up when we're talking about her report. And it's not the only part of the staff reports that's coming up where there's a missing piece from me, but I applaud the staff from continuing on while I was away, and I'll just have to pick up from here on September 30th.
Okay. Anything else?
No, just a guess of not follow-up question, maybe suggestion is rather maybe if it requires more time rather than put you under the cosh too much. I appreciate and understand what you have going on. Maybe council can allow us to extend that timeline to October, so that you're not rushing to get it in, and then it's not fully baked or cooked as it's supposed to be.
If I'm juggling a baby on one arm and typing up the report on the other, I'll certainly, if it's as soon as it's ready, I'll get it into council. But I do appreciate the understanding if it perhaps is the first meeting in October. So thank you.
Fair enough.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, great. Thank you, CAO, Deputy CAO, for that. let's move on to the staff report on the 21-22 business plan, which was deferred from July 29th.
So I know I already introduced it the last time around, so I'll just be brief to say that as has now been the practice for the last 3 years, staff produces an annual business plan, the primary purpose of which is to provide accountability to the community on the role of staff in executing council's overall objectives. So the report draws on council's approved strategic plan as well as the budget for the year, and articulates how staff are working to achieve council's objectives that have been set out. It also provides our updated organizational chart and information on the current staff complement, which is always subject to change. So I will say, even though we've just done this draft report, we already have one change, and I don't know if that's been announced here. I referenced Catherine's departure. I did want to announce on the record here that Martha Horstman has joined us as the new Climate and Energy Program Manager of the town. So she'll be joining into upcoming meetings and sessions as appropriate. But that's already a change on our organizational chart draft there. And maybe if council's inclined to approve, we can approve with one amendment to the name of our Climate and Energy Program Manager. But I'm happy to take any questions about the business plan.
Okay. Councillor Carver.
Yes, I have one question about the human relations, the HR function. And is that something that would fit into one of the core functions in the plan, or is that somewhere else?
So human resources, you mean?
Human resources, sorry, that's what I meant.
Oh, sorry. So yeah, human resources is down, I believe, under myself as a core function. So let's see, where do I have that? I guess it's under staff management in this case. So maybe it's the choice of the. Oh no, it's not under. I know it is referenced in here. It was. Well, here I go saying that, and then.
It is at the top, staff management, I think.
Well, staff management is certainly referenced specifically, and then I think I referenced development of HR policy components with administrative department in the safety program update. But I guess those are the two references, so it could be elaborated on there.
Thank you. I just noticed it and felt it was something missing there.
Okay. Any Deputy Mayor?
So, I mean, this, I guess, for me, being the first business plan that I'm going through, I know it references the strategic plan and the budget, but it doesn't provide anything in this document. If somebody was just to come across it, I guess by itself. So I was also wondering, is the intent that there will be links in there, or it just sits as it is, separate, with no connections to those two other documents?
Yeah, typically the connection's made on the website by the links being presented in a way that it's associated. But you're right, if you have the document, there could be a link in the document to where the other documents are hosted on the website in case you're reading it in an offline format. And that's a change we could make to the introduction of the document.
Yeah. As the other follow-up piece is around communications. I sort of noticed it's is it a core function of the administration section? But there's nothing there mentioning social media. I was wondered whether that was, I guess, intentional, or do we need to capture it as part of an activity that should be, I guess, a core function of that particular the administration department? Because I think for myself, I think based on some of the conversations we've had today, there's a need for us to strengthen that area for us. So
No, I think you're correct that the terminology around media releases hasn't changed in the last couple of years, and the town has in that time passed a social media policy. So we probably should specifically articulate social media under that core function, and that's an easy change.
Okay. CAO, I'm curious. We now have the strategic plan, and we have the budget. And what does the existence of the business plan, what does it mean for you as the CAO? What does it give you that the strategic plan and the budget or operational plan don't give you? Or doesn't
Thank you.
give the public, perhaps?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think that is the key thing in the introduction that I provided. You know, this document is an articulation to the public. We often hear, what do all those people do? It's a common refrain when it comes to town staff. And this document is a way to help to provide that context for people. It's quite clear that these small teams are delivering a broad range of services for the residents of the town. And the province, I think, probably started the practice in the public sector in Nova Scotia of publishing these documents, and it's an accountability function. The province describes it as an accountability function to require all of their departments to produce these business plans. So you're right that it's not providing authorization to do things that staff were not already doing, and we're not looking for authorization through the passage of the business plan, but it is an articulation that I think is valuable, and it also provides staff with a structure to essentially look at, okay, so council has defined certain objectives for the year. How are we going to make those happen? So the process of developing this plan at the staff level is a valuable process for us to essentially get moving on the objectives of council each year, and then articulate to the public how that is happening.
Okay. The responsibilities, a lot of the responsibilities of the CAO are developed, are provided for in the Municipal Government Act, as well as the responsibilities of towns for certain services to citizens. Can we rightly assume that the directions of the Municipal Government Act, as appropriate, are reflected in this document? Citizens will know that you talk about the accountabilities that are defined by the province. They can know that this document gives them that additional piece of information around the accountabilities that the province is requiring you and your team, council's team as well, but what those accountabilities that they're being given. Does it provide for that, in your opinion?
I think that it does highlight a lot of those areas, but I would say that it is not as exhaustive in the if you talk about like the authorities that are delegated to the CAO by council under the MGA. I don't think that this description is as exhaustive as that, but it is a lot more specific. So where the MGA may say that the CAO has the ability to undertake certain negotiations or enter into certain agreements on behalf of the town, this document is going to say specifically which entities that I am delegated, such as the area financial authorization committee, where the CAOs of the 3 units provide authorization through area. So that's detailed here. In the specific, I think the general powers of the CAO are better and more broadly delineated in the MGA.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone have any questions? Councillor Carver.
Well, I was prepared to make a motion that council accept the business plan as submitted. Oh no, with the correction of the new staff person's name.
Thank you. CAO, you have a comment on the motion?
Well, I can let it get a seconder. I just have to suggest, because we've had the conversation, a couple other little details that I'm happy to suggest the friendly inclusion of in that motion.
Okay, do we have a seconder? Councillor Burdick? CAO on the question?
Just if the mover and seconder wish to, I just wanted to note there were four things that had come up, including my suggestion of referencing the new program manager. The others were to reference the specific term human resources management under the list of what describes staff management under the CAO. The third was to add document links to the annual budget and the council strategic plan where those documents are referenced in the introduction. And the fourth was under administration core functions to add social media to the prepares media releases clause. So essentially, if supported by the mover and seconder, those four changes and approving the document with those four changes would be great, and I can make those changes for the draft that goes up on the website.
Okay, Councillor
That's
Carver?
fine with me.
Okay, Councillor Burdick, friendly amendments? Okay, excellent. You've heard the motion and the friendly amendments. On the question, all in favor? That motion is carried. Thank you. Let's go to the Coastal Protection Act consultation.
So council had, I guess at my urging, directed staff to provide some additional context for the Coastal Protection Act consultation that is ongoing. If we were going to make any additional submission, and as with other parts of this package, it was prepared by staff in my absence, but I had the opportunity before leaving to review this summary that was produced by Catherine and our summer intern in climate and energy, Sarah. I think they did a great job of summarizing the Coastal Protection Act consultation. And so the council responds, the recommendation is the council would respond if there are any areas that appear to go further than those being contemplated through Plan Mahone Bay. So, option in that regard is either we feel that there are off the top of our heads, we feel that there aren't, or we refer this over to the steering committee discussion, and that's taking place shortly, and ask for consideration of whether this document is in line with what's being recommended by our planners. So I haven't had the opportunity to run it by them, but it would be quite simple, I think, for us to do that.
Okay, Councillor Feeney.
Mayor, I think just the cadence of the August hiatus, and I think council's energy stepping up to trying to do the deliverable at the end of July for the land use bylaw. And there's a few things that I think we still have to litigate, and we haven't had a chance to get together. I know that's happening later on this month. And I think it does specifically, I'm not sure if this is anything we need to worry about, but I do think we should have the conversation, specifically around the setbacks. I know there are a number of issues around the LUB submission and the setbacks and the 15 meters, and whether that's something we want to sign up for, either on the ocean or on the normal water courses running through town. And the other thing is height restriction. And I guess it's minimum heights and maximum heights. I know are always bones of contention, both in the open shoreline protection zone, which I'm pleased with how that's evolving in the LUB document. But I guess the reason I'm bringing it up now is it's not crystal clear to me which act will supersede the other. So, and that would be a question I have for the CAO, if there are provisions in the act that are more onerous than the planning bylaw, I assume we absolutely have to comply with the provincial act.
Yeah, the act will take precedence, and really what we're looking at here is if what's being recommended by our planners currently goes further than what is being included in the regulations of the act, to be aware of that and then presumably not have comment. But if the recommendation from our planners stops short of where the act is currently proposing, there may be a desire to provide comment in that respect. And the deadline is the end of September.
Okay, so it's that we have time. So we'll be able to have our roundtable discussion around the LUB commentary that we've all provided before we're required to put in our submission to the coastal action, consultation.
Yeah, that next meeting of the steering team will take place before that. And I guess
Okay.
like we did with the Talking Trees correspondence, if this were referred to that steering team meeting, we would have some opportunity to have that discussion. I think mostly it would give the planners an opportunity to consider
Mhm,
how this, and I'm sure they have, interacts with what they're recommending.
mhm. I think the fact that we had the LUB information submissions, but we haven't yet as a council had to get together to talk about what we've all submitted, is, I think the sooner we do that, and I guess it's on the agenda here in the next 2 weeks,
Yeah.
will be helpful.
Councillor Carver.
Just a related question, because I believe September 21st is the day when we're meeting as the steering team. And
That's,
when,
yeah.
what's the timeline or time frame for receiving the draft documents? So that we can review them before the meeting, or is that not part of the plan?
You would already have received the draft MPS and LUB, but you mean the commentary, like collected
Yeah.
commentary? Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not sure about that. I'm sure that there will be some intention to provide it prior to the meeting. Maureen, do we have anything to add to that other than that I'm sure we will get something out?
I was under the understanding that part of the process thus far was going to be that the planner was going to have all of the comments together for everyone to see and discuss at that time. It was my understanding, but I don't have the specifics yet for next week.
We'll check in with them. And I think the package for that meeting, whatever it would consist of, would be coming out later this week, right?
I will admit I have an unopened email from the planner who's been a little busy in my department the last couple of days.
So I guess, Mayor, cutting to the chase on this agenda item tonight, like I know that there is a suggested motion, but like it's not clear to me if we are suggesting, it's not clear to me where we are on being able to ask that question. And I think I would prefer if we could defer this item to our next council meeting, which would happen after the meeting on the 21st. I think after we had a chance to have the discussion around the LUB, I know there's a number of Q&As specifically to be fair to everybody. The setback issue, I think I would love to hear everybody's impression about that. It hasn't gone to the public for public consultation either, but just to make sure we're all, I'd be curious to know what everybody else is thinking, because I'm guessing that it's not going to align very well with the Coastal Action Act in the final analysis, given that the setback here is 80 to 100 meters. And I know that doesn't mean that you can't build, but it means there are regulations. Anyway, the point I'm saying is I prefer if we could defer this one more till the next meeting. I think we can have those conversations on the 21st and probably on the 22nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th, but certainly in enough time that we can submit our response back by the end of the month.
Okay, thank you. Shall we defer till the September 30th meeting?
So yeah, whether it's term deferred to September 30th or refer to the steering team, I guess we'll just need to make a note that that's the intention, but I think it works either way.
Okay. Are we in agreement to defer? Okay.
Yeah.
That item will, Deputy Mayor?
September 30th will be, I guess, a public holiday, right?
Yes, that's right.
Oh, it is Reconciliation
Mhm.
Day,
Yeah.
that's right. Except in Ontario. Ontario's not going to observe it for some reason, but
So will we still be meeting on that day?
It's a very good question. I don't think we've considered what that meant with the council schedule, and just having come back from leave, I hadn't had a
Yeah.
chance to talk about it at all. Thank you for bringing it up. I don't know what the alternative is because I know we have a very busy,
October.
yeah, well, just a very busy week in general. Deputy, clerk, do you have a sense of the meetings that week? Because we do have a meeting the day before, right?
That the following week, you recall? So we could do, we could decide to go on the evening of the 29th, I think. Oh, yeah, that's the 5th Wednesday, so I think that means you don't have JSB, is that correct?
That should be the case.
I think JSB will be next week.
Yeah, it is.
22nd, yeah.
22nd.
Mhm.
Steering
could just-
committee's 21st, audit committee's the 23rd. Yeah, could do the 29th. I could anyway.
Sure.
Anyone have a problem with that on their calendar, Deputy Mayor?
That'll be too much. I'll not be available. I would propose that we, rather than do that, we can shift policy and strategy and not do policy and strategy.
I don't, I mean, this is my perception, think there was anything on policy and strategy that was so time sensitive that it couldn't just be canceled for a month and resume in October on its regular schedule.
Okay,
Sounds good too.
that was the Monday, wasn't it?
Monday, the 27th.
27th.
I like a holiday that doesn't just shift work one day over.
Should we, I guess we would entertain a motion to reschedule the second council meeting in October to the 27th. I'm sorry, the 30th of September, reschedule it to the 27th of September, thereby canceling the Policy and Strategy Committee meeting for September. Somebody want to make that motion? Deputy Mayor, do we have a seconder?
I was just
Okay,
wondering,
Yes, sir?
there's a motion on the floor, right? There's another motion on the floor. No? Okay.
I don't,
No, there was discussion and I believe council had reached consensus to defer
yes,
this matter, but there was no motion on the floor.
okay. So we do have a motion to change the meeting from the 30th to the 27th, thereby canceling the strategy and policy meeting for September. All in favor? That motion is carried. And so we would now defer this item.
Get a motion
we
to
are
defer
not-
to the 27th now that
Yeah.
now that we have the date.
That's right, which is post the discussion for the bylaw, land use bylaw discussion.
Actually, a little bit better for us to be able to provide any submission to the Coastal Protection Act since the deadline is the 30th. So now I won't have to do it the same night as our meeting.
Okay. So we need a motion to defer this item to the meeting on the 27th.
So move.
Councillor Carver moves. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Feeney? All in favor? The motion's carried. So this item, the Coastal Protection Act consultation, will move to the 27th of September at the now rescheduled council meeting. Okay. The public hearing report of the clerk for the local improvement bylaw.
Your worship, a public hearing was held earlier this evening, September 14th, 2021, to receive verbal and written submissions regarding the Town of Mahone Bay draft local improvement bylaw. In advance of that public hearing, council had been forwarded 15 written submissions, and one additional submission was read into the record. One member of the public presented comments to the hearing in person, virtually.
Okay.
Now that the hearing has been held, council's in a position to consider final passage of that bylaw if you so choose.
Thank you. Do we have a motion, council? Councillor Carver.
Well, I don't have a motion. I have some thoughts. I had been prepared to make a motion tonight to hold another information session so that citizens would have had more opportunity to ask questions and to for council to learn more about the bylaw. But having heard the submissions and the pretty strong thread through all of them almost about the importance of having a united community and not splitting people into haves, have-nots, and creating friction where it needn't be there. And also having heard that there were some components of the draft bylaw that seemed to interest people, in particular the idea that citizens, property owners could initiate a project or petition for a project, so that the option of asking staff to redraft this bylaw. I don't think we can pass it tonight for second reading, but can we ask staff to redraft it in the ways that people have suggested? Plain language, clearer examples, specific examples, tidying up the formulas, or is it a better option to refer to the strategy, the planning, which is a strategy and planning committee, for further discussion and perhaps a recommendation to council? So those are some of my thoughts. I'd be happy to hear people pick up some threads or to toss the ideas around.
Okay. Anyone? Councillor Wilson.
Am I missing this, or it was the hearing on the 14th to do with the fire department bylaw?
No, the public hearing tonight was today's the 14th.
I'm
That was
sorry,
the
I
public
thought-
hearing we just held.
Oh, my apologies. Now I understand it. So we're really talking about the local improvement bylaw,
Yes.
Mhm.
not the meeting from last night, of course.
No.
Gotcha.
Councillor Feeney.
Mayor, Mr. Morse's submission, which came in late and the clerk read it into the minutes of the meeting, I think had a lot of salient points. I think, he starts off his well-crafted letter talking about, the good intentions of council. And I do think that is a fair representation of the original thinking. But it's clear that through the evolution of the document crafting and I guess the nature of our due diligence and how we look to other communities to help us form the cut and paste nature of building bylaws from scratch, that some of the original, good intent did get lost in translation. And, if you have someone someone like Mr. Haysom, for example, who spoke well about his inability to kind of get through the document, I'm sure we all can understand his perspective on that front. It just seems to me that to a large degree, the well's poisoned, and the good intentions that were originally a driver for moving this forward are overwhelmed by the challenges of writing a good bylaw. And I think the question that Councillor Wilson asked about, why now, and what's driving this at this point, given the amount of items that we have on our agenda over the next couple months, specifically the land use bylaw and a few other items, which are going to be heavy lifting. Look, I don't think we ought to spend a lot of time on this now. And I think this is an excellent example of where the community responds to the process. We had our meeting, we had 15 submissions, but I'm not prepared to support the second reading tonight. And I think that's where the rest of the council is as well. But I do think we need to be a little judicial with our time and how much energy we want to spend on improving something that the community is unlikely to embrace, even after we spend enough time to address the concerns that were appropriate, that were addressed. So I think I'd be prepared to move the second reading in the context of having a vote. And then I personally would be, I think we should just put this to bed by not approving the bylaw. So that's just a couple, more than 2 cents, but I'll throw that out there.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor and then Councillor Burdick.
I think Joe makes some very good point, and I don't disagree with the direction, but just to sort of give my thoughts around why we're where we're at. I think one of the things that for me is very evident is our challenges in how we craft and communicate what we are up to continue just to show up in different ways, and this is one of them. I think in many ways, like I said, the good intentions of the bylaw, we shot ourselves in the foot in how we communicated it and how it came out into the public. So having had many robust conversations, taken it back to policy and strategy and got to a place where we felt we had something that was workable, it feels like a lot of good energy lost. But I also feel that one of the things we were elected to do is to listen to the people we represent, and the people we represent are saying, no, we don't want it. And maybe we listen to that, but take into account the reason why we wanted the bylaw in the first place. The reason why the bylaw was pitched to us in the first place was that to enable council to have the opportunity to partner with our community where something is not within the strategic plan, it's not in the plans for the next 5 years, but residents want to bring that forward. So not lose that opportunity that at some point we can revisit it and figure out how do we best craft something that the community will be ready for. And I can, from my perspective, I think there's a way we can do that and rescue it, but the energy is not there right now. And like Joe said, maybe, well, let's put it to bed, tackle the issues that we have right now, but still come back to it, because I think when you talk about housing and affordability and things like that, when we want to develop other areas of town so that we can access more land and things like that, that kind of bylaw might be very helpful for us. So it's something that might become necessary for us as we think about it going further.
Thank you. Councillor Burdick, then CAO, and then Councillor Carver.
I do think that this is something that we've obviously received a lot of feedback on, and my sense is that yes, at this point, it's not a second reading would not be advisable for the document as it stands. The main feedback I got from citizens, and it's represented in the documents that we received, was that they didn't understand what was going to happen. Essentially, they wanted tangible examples. They wanted to know what it would mean to them in a practical sense. But there was also interest from people in the idea of proposals from citizens about particular, expansions or extensions of services. So my question would be for the CAO. I know that this has come up in the past without a bylaw where we've had to deal with proposed extension of services. Is there a practical mechanism now that we can employ and that we can tell the citizens about that can be used in lieu of this bylaw, at least as things arise? For example, if somebody would like to have water at the end of their street, is there going to be the necessity of getting all the neighbors on board for that? Is there a certain number involved? That sort of thing. I think those sort of practical examples of how it plays out for people are very useful.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Burdick. CAO?
So I will try to return to Councillor Burdick's question, but I also wanted to address the point that I had wanted to raise. I'm not going to disagree with Councillor Feeney that staff are very busy and council has a significant agenda, and that obviously that this item is not one of the top priorities, and we need to take our resources into account when we make any decisions. That being said, I really did feel that I needed to comment about the sort of consultative process as outlined by the clerk in the hearing, and the characterization by some of that process as not being a good one or successful one. I'm actually loving the input that we've received on this bylaw. I mean, we did, as was noted, a typical thing. We looked at what other communities have done. We looked for the standard template local improvement bylaw that's been developed in this province and it's been used in Yarmouth and in HRM and in Truro and in other places. And so, we took that and we said, hey, this seems like it works in other places. It should work here. And for a while, as most sort of semi-incomprehensible government documents do, nobody took note. But finally, thankfully, we beat the bushes enough. We got people to take an interest, and they gave us excellent feedback, which acknowledged the spirit of it, what council would like to do, the value of promoting opportunities, as has been noted by members of council here, for people to cost share as appropriate with expansion of infrastructure. And we look at our history. Our first sidewalks that were put in on Main Street were put in by petition to the council by local businesses who petitioned the council to cost share in the new sidewalks for Main Street. So I mean, that's the origin of that infrastructure. I think it's a great example where we've heard from people. I agree, and I think at the end of the day that what we've heard isn't that the process was flawed. I think what we've heard is that we need to do a better job than the HRM and Yarmouth and other communities have done in drafting a bylaw that anyone can understand and really articulates how people can work with the town on an extension of services. So understanding Councillor Feeney's point about resources, and Deputy Mayor's point about how this may fit into future intentions, we have parked other items for next year in the Policy and Strategy Committee agenda. I think, my suggestion would be that it's a disservice to the public process to simply say, oh, people paid attention to something we were doing, we probably shouldn't do it now. I think the best way to respect the intentions of people's commentary would be to have a discussion about local improvements and how they can be facilitated by a bylaw without being too hung up on the draft bylaw that was developed in other communities, and to do that at such a time as it is reasonable and fits into the priorities of council. And to come back around to Councillor Burdick, your question, just repeat it briefly for me if you don't mind.
Oh, sure. It was essentially, is there a mechanism in place? Yeah.
So we have had these requests. I think people can remember we paved the turn loop at the top of Main Street on the way out to Blockhouse about a year ago. That came as a direct request. There was a letter written to council that said outline the issues experienced with the former gravel surface treatment there, and why the resident would like to see us make that change. And council discussed it and got staff to, quotations for budget and approved it, and we did it. And that's an example where there was no cost sharing element involved, and it was seen by the council to be beneficial. So essentially, it's a case by case. The letter comes into the council, and council will determine if it is beneficial. It does mean that there are certain cases where if the town does not feel that 100% of the project, and that may be, for example, extension of the water system to serve a single property, if the council does not feel that shouldering 100% of that burden is reasonable, then that project likely will not proceed. We don't really have any way to find a middle ground currently on those kind of projects. And that is something that this type of a bylaw would facilitate. I think it's often people presume we're talking about huge areas, hundreds of residents, but we're Mahone Bay, we're most likely talking about 1 or 2 residents at a time. And if a single resident came to the town to petition for extension of a service by just a single property, it would only be that property that would be consenting and petitioning the town, but there may be a cost sharing formula that would be applied. So in the current time, council will decide if a project warrants it to shoulder 100% of the cost.
CAO, that's the next story, I think, after this one. Councillor Carver?
Yes, so if council does not support second reading of this bylaw tonight, then where do we stand in terms of the intentions that were present in drafting this bylaw? What can we do next, and what's within our power to do?
CAO?
So if this bylaw goes to second reading and is defeated for second reading, there would be no, official lingering remnant unless a motion is made to add development of a mechanism for cost sharing on service extensions or something of that nature to the 2021-22 Policy and Strategy Committee agenda, or another future opportunity that I'm not, my thought would be that would have to be the motion, just to ensure that it remains on a list and that this group of council members generally know where we've come from on the issue.
Councillor Carver, are you?
Yeah, I'm still a little vague about what our
Okay.
options are. I heard that earlier the CAO spoke about having discussions with the public about the potential. I mean, how this kind of bylaw might work or might benefit people in the community. And if that kind of discussion, if with second reading is not passed tonight, can we still have that discussion?
I would think CAO, in consideration of Councillor Carver's suggestion, that before the Policy and Strategy Committee would enter into discussions in light of all the things that have gone on in the last 7 days, that we should sit down in session with the citizens who might choose to get involved, to get their perspectives on such a bylaw, which would help guide the Policy and Strategy Committee, would it not?
Essentially, that's the resource question that we talked about. So if the council were to make a priority of it, then I would say that defeating the bylaw and scheduling a PIM, and the PIM again would be about local improvement, but hopefully a lot more people would attend than I think 3 residents who attended the PIM back in January. But I guess, just to note, the scheduling of that PIM and the work redrafting the bylaw are all considerable staff time commitments and council time commitments. So, to do it as soon as possible versus to do it after it is determined to be the appropriate time to do so. And I guess that's why I was suggesting possibly the referral to strategy and policy, primarily to say, yes, now is the right time, more of the strategy side than the policy.
And that goes to Councillor Feeney's comment about not trying to pile everything on the cart right now, but if you can push something off the screen for a few months, do so. Counselor Feeney?
So, I mean, we have a mechanism to deal with issues like that. We have one on the staffs. We have an item very similar for the Fairmont Street extension, for example. We get a request, gets analyzed, and due diligence ensues, and inevitably there'll be a staff recommendation, and something will come back to council and we'll deliberate it. So it's not as if in the interim, to Councillor Carver's point, we don't have mechanisms to make progress. We do. It's just so we're all on the same page. It's just 100% on the town's dime, all funded by the taxpayers, of course. But I think that's the point. I really do believe that in reading the 15 or 16 submissions, there was a lot of focus. Even the title of the bylaws around service improvement, and I think a lot of the angst and concern from the community was around what they believe, and maybe rightly so, based on the language of the bylaw, a scenario where the mandate would creep, and the original intent, which was really around incremental service expansion, when requested by the homeowners, versus something that was thrust upon people by the town, would creep into day-to-day issues like, I want to fix a pothole on Main Street and they're going to get a levy. So fair enough. I mean, I think we heard the message. We heard the responses from the community. But I think it's a start from scratch situation. And I think as far as and I'm not sure about a simple deferral or a referral to the strategy committee will give a lot of comfort to the community. And I personally prefer if we have a definitive view tonight to let people understand that their messages have been delivered and heard, and we can figure out at a later date where to go from here, but go from a fresh, clean piece of paper versus trying to edit what we already have. That's just my 2 cents worth, just so we can, and it's great to live in town when you get this kind of response. This is one of the best parts about living here.
Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. I agree with Councillor Feeney. I think it's imperative that we move to pass this bylaw on second reading, and that we defeat the bylaw on second reading and start over. I think Varian was quite eloquent about the difficulties with the language and the format, and there are just so many problems with what was presented to us way back in November that it would be impossible really to fix it. It's better this is a case where euthanasia is a really good idea, and let's start again. And having said that, I would like to move that we approve the second reading of this bylaw.
Do we have a seconder? Councillor Carver? Okay.
I'll second it and say that also that I've heard and taken seriously the comments of my fellow councillors, because they've helped me sort of shift out of my mental muddle about it, because it's so complicated. So I do like the idea of a clean slate, starting afresh. So yeah, I'll support. No, I won't support the motion.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, you've heard the motion. It's been moved and seconded. This is on the second reading of the bylaw. Anyone in favor? Opposed? The motion is defeated. Thank you. A good decision. Okay, well, let's go on to the fire department's helmet procurement request. And there is a motion in that. CAO, were you going to speak to the project? Oh, Councillor Carver is.
Oh, well, I was just going to make the motion to.
Yeah, I
okay.
wasn't going to add anything. I was just going to say, I think it is quite straightforward presentation. It was outside of the budget, but it was felt to be something the department would
Yeah.
like to give council the option not to wait till next year, being as the fire department has a dedicated reserve.
I think it's
Okay.
critical that the fire department have the proper equipment. And
Yep.
so I would like to move that council approve the unbudgeted purchase of 10 firefighting helmets at a total cost of $6,776.68 to be funded from the Fire Equipment Capital Reserve.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Feeney. You've heard the motion. On the question. All in favor? Motion is carried. They will have their helmets. Now to Town Hall. I'm sorry, Deputy Mayor, did you have a question? I thought you were voting for the motion.
Yeah, I was voting for it, but I also have a question. I didn't want the question to sort of seem as if I'm not interested in voting for it. But the question for me is around our spending on reserves. So we're spending these, and then the next question is around spending on the reserves and so on and so forth. I guess when I think about the town's coffers, similar to when I think about my own pockets, when I'm budgeting, I'm trying to make sure that I at least take into account what I need before it comes into play. And so with the just to understand with the fire hall and fire equipment needs, is that something that they review annually and then they give us sort of an idea these costs will come up, or is it just anticipated that the reserve will be there, and if these costs come up, then the reserves can pick it up?
Good question. CAO?
So with the purchase of equipment that is substantial enough to be considered capital, it would go first to the capital reserve rather than operating. Surplus in the year, well, I guess it's a little bit complicated. There's a dedicated transfer in the case of fire to the fire reserve, and additionally, funds that are raised for fire purchases or donations are also automatically directed into the fire capital reserve. So we don't generally use operating. Now there will be, now that we have a fire rate, that's why I'm stumbling a little because this is new. Now that we have a fire rate, when there is a surplus in the operating within fire, that will be isolated, and we'll have to determine our end of year practice in terms of whether that is going to be transferred into the fire capital reserves. We haven't traditionally maintained a fire operating reserve, but for all intents and purposes, if we run a surplus and determine that surplus will be transferred into that same operating reserve, it would be the identical effect if we were to pay out of operating versus if we were to pay out of the reserve and then end up with an operating surplus. So my assumption is, now that we have a fire rate, that is what we'll do. This is just our first year with the fire rate being isolated, and therefore the ability to run a surplus in the fire rate.
Okay. Deputy Mayor, you happy with that?
If you don't
Okay.
mind me following up, Councillor Feeney. So if I'm to understand it right, in future iterations, there will be, I guess, a process whereby the fire department does some budgeting to figure out what costs they will be absorbed by that reserve,
so
or-
as far as trying to get all these capital items out there in advance and make sure they're incorporated into the budget, we do that every year. We're getting better at it every year, and I think specifically with the fire department, we are getting better at it every year. So I think we'll have a better reflection next year, try to capture some of these pieces. We should be using an asset management approach, having a good schedule for replacement of equipment and not really being surprised by something like these helmet purchases. So in that way, it would be in the budget. I was just speaking more broadly to what happens when something isn't in the budget, and how do we accommodate it within the year, and the difference between the reserve and operating. But we hope not to have those unbudgeted expenditures, and certainly we should have been able to predict something like this. I think we are doing much better at that each year, and I think next year shouldn't have a surprise like replacement of helmets, but it does depend on good communication between the town and the department membership, and that's certainly been improving in recent times.
Okay, thank you. Other comments on the motion? We've already passed the motion on the fire department helmet procurement. Thank you. Let's go to town hall renovation funding. And there's a motion here as well.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I noted earlier that there was an item in addition to the bicycle report that the staff were working on in my absence, and it's great to see this here. It is essentially half of a report. You might be reading it and thinking, shouldn't there be a conclusion on the project? Shouldn't there be a report on the conclusion of the project? We actually haven't finished the deficiencies walkthrough and response from the contractor at this time. So that's something that will be forthcoming to council very soon. This report, does stand in the sense that the budget overage and noted impact on the reserve, if we go with the intention to finance from reserve, that is likely to be accurate at the end of the day. But the missing information here will have to come in the form of a separate report, and certainly there's no reason for council to not to defer this if you'd like to have the conclusion of the project and that final report in hand when considering this information. We can also speak just to the difference between reserve and borrowing as outlined in Luke's report. So you did a good job preparing it. I just wasn't there to attach the remainder, which
Okay.
actually isn't ready yet because we haven't finished that process with the contractor.
Comments? Councillor Feeney.
I think that detail would be really, comforting. I think when council looks at the fire hall investment and the whole renewal of the town hall, we look at it in the context of where we started, which was, around $100,000 with a bunch of that money coming from accessibility and COVID related funding sources. And then, of course, we've run into incremental investment that's required based on ripping the walls down. And we ended up where we ended up, which is, I think, in all, is a pretty good place. But, when I look at the vernacular we're using in the document so far, it makes it imply that we're taking our capital reserve, to the deputy mayor's point, and we're melting it down, when I think really, like, this is a budgeted item. I mean, it's in the staff report. It's just the mechanics of how the dollars get assigned, and then if they get spent or not get spent, and then whatever's not spent goes into the reserve and the circle. So I think in this situation, I think the real issue is what decisions had we made before about to what degree we're going to borrow to do this project versus fund it out of the four sources of our capital, which is the area dividend, the transfer tax, the infrastructure charge, and the gas tax. But my reckoning, based on all of the staff report earlier on, we've got a lot of have not starteds. And I think this will be our third, if not fourth year in a row where we've had our capital investment is going to our capital received from those four sources is going to far exceed our cash spend, which is what we've enjoyed the last 2 years. And therefore the reserves have built up, and now they're approaching $1 million on the capital reserve. So I think the context for this discussion, are we going to use the reserves and forego the debt, is something the council really needs to weigh in on. I just don't know if we're prepared to have that conversation this evening. So when you're able to borrow at 1% or 1.5% from the Municipal Finance Corp, what is the appropriate balance between using cash versus using debt? And I think that has to be in the context of the entire portfolio of capital investments, of which, let's face it, we're 5 months into the year. We've got a few things on the table. We've got a lot, we've got a lot on the books that we're not going to spend this year, clearly. I mean, it's just the times we're living in, COVID, RFPs, staff turnover, a whole bunch of things. $50,000 on the cemetery fence. Are we really going to spend that money this year, for example? Who knows? Maybe not. So I think waiting, I think as the CAO mentioned, like, let's wait till the rest of the information comes in, and we'll talk about this. But I really think it needs to be in the context, not of this particular investment. It needs to be the context of the capital program and what visibility we have, let's say in late October, about how much of that we're going to spend between now and the end of March. Because I don't think we're going to spend much from the looks of it.
CAO.
And further to Councillor Feeney's point, this expenditure, for one, wouldn't be eligible for borrowing until the spring debenture in any case. So, you know, that's not until April. So just to kind of put some context on the timeline.
So CAO, are you comfortable to wait on the motion until such time as we have the additional information?
Yeah, I mean, I'm comfortable for council to accept this report for information at this time, if that's council's will, rather than making a decision. I just wanted to stress that the decision doesn't need to be made tonight,
Okay.
and it will be referenced in future reporting.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor.
I appreciate the hesitance to make a decision, and I do understand the need to have full information, but from the narrative we've just had, the decision will not change for us. I think it's almost made to a certain extent. It's just a case of us being comfortable in making that call.
Thank you, Councillor Feeney.
So fair enough, Deputy Mayor. I tend to agree, but here's a scenario and why it would be important for us to talk about it. Somebody's going to get elected this month. All I see is a whole bunch of federal government platforms with massive infrastructure investments. I'm assuming sometime somebody's going to give us some infrastructure money, sometime. So the point is, will those projects be eligible for financing? So sometimes we need to be strategic about keeping cash in the bank and borrowing so that investments that we want to make, we can participate in if they're not eligible for the Municipal Finance Corp financing based on the timeline. So anyway, this isn't a hill to die on tonight, but I do think that making a decision tonight to take our reserve down by 33%, I would rather have a little bit more information, just to say if this is the right time. If it's the right decision, I think we'll all come to that together. And, you know, another month from now, we'll know a lot more.
Okay. Councillor Carver.
Well, when we get to that discussion, I would also like to know more about the how stretched we are in the town's debt carrying capacity. So I'm feeling a little anxious about that and would like to know how stretched are we. So that I hope that that'll be part of the discussion.
Okay. So for now, we would entertain a motion to accept the report from the CAO as presented on the town hall renovations. If somebody wants to move it, Councillor Feeney, do we have a seconder? Councillor Burdick, thank you. You heard the motion. On the question. All in favor? Motion is carried. Thank you. Let's go to the next item, which is the bicycle route engagement. There's another motion hidden in there.
Yes, and I'm not sure if everybody else had the same difficulty I did with the package. Catherine did go to quite some length to provide a detailed report. There's a short staff report followed by a long summary report. I think there was some issue with linking that document in the package. So if any members of council were not able to access and review the full report on the recent engagement activities, including Bike Day that took place in August, and I think was quite successful for that. I would encourage council members to take the time to go back and review that, and I apologize for the issues with linking, as sometimes happens with the package. But for the report, you know, to the extent that we're able to speak to it, and hopefully people had a chance to look at least the staff report part, we're advancing a recommendation there that Catherine and I talked about before I went off on leave, and I think the recommendation stands. But in practice, I wanted to just briefly talk about the Connect 2 program timeline with Department of Energy. This is a program that we've accessed in prior years. It can support design work or capital improvement for active transportation. It's one of the 2 identified funding sources. Unlike the federal source, the federal accessibility funding, which is a rolling program and a new program open until it's been fully committed, the Connect 2 is an annual program from the Provincial Department of Energy and has a tight deadline coming up next week. So we had to submit an expression of interest to essentially say what kind of projects we would be looking to apply for. And I did ask Catherine to essentially take the projects that were on the horizon with respect to traffic calming on Kinburn and Claremont Street, and the proposal to create a bicycle cut through from Kinburn to Main Street, and advance those as would these be eligible for application to the Connect 2 program. We did hear back confirmation that they would be, in addition to a third, which was on the Edgewater Street, a long stated objective of council to improve pedestrian and cycle opportunity along Edgewater Street, whether that's rehabilitating the existing sections that were done back in the 90s along the church parking lots area, or extending that around towards Keddy's. And so she included that as a third possibility, as would be improvement of the waterfront trail for pedestrian and cyclist use. So all of those were considered to be appropriate for application to the Connect 2 program. That being said, none of those is advanced to a stage where I have a concrete proposal to say this is exactly what we're looking at. And therefore, applying to the Connect 2 program next week is something that would be, for the infrastructure improvement itself, is something that would be a bit challenging. The Connect 2 program will likely be back next year. It has been going for quite a number of years now. And it certainly wouldn't be staff's intention to rush council to making an application if we don't feel that any of those areas, all of which we've been talking about, is advanced enough to make an application. So I note the recommendation there is to direct staff to apply to the Connect 2 program and the Federal Accessibility Program, but I'm not. I can put together an application, I think, on any one of those things within a week's time. I think we could do, but I'm not sure that council would be comfortable not having the opportunity to review that in more detail. We have an expectation of a staff report coming to an upcoming meeting, looking at traffic calming, for example. So, I wouldn't want to prejudge the conclusion of that process either. I hate to pass up any funding opportunity, but I just wanted to note that when we put this together, maybe we thought, as I noted earlier, that we'd be at a place tonight where we would have a concrete recommendation, and that just hasn't worked out that way.
Councillor Feeney.
Mayor, specifically on that list of eligible projects, and sounds like a very attractive list to me. I know that the cut through on Main Street between Kinburn at the liquor store property or some other location, I'm assuming that's still the thinking, Dylan. I'm not sure if you've had an opportunity to advance those conversations with the liquor store, if that's still an opportunity. I know if it was, I think that's would be a tremendous addition. And we had a really elegant presentation, of course, from Bicycle Nova Scotia and the Blue Route team. I guess it was a little over 2 years ago now, where that was really the focal point of the community improvement, and specifically having that bicycle route and safety to be able to get people from the school side of town, the Bayview School, to the other side of the community safely, predominantly for children driving bikes. And that was their number one project on that list, was the cut through. So if we were going to be able to, and I believe there was a budget, and I'm sure it's out of date, but directionally, but like I think that we should apply if we can, given if that's an opportunity to move that forward with the liquor store, and then we'll sort it out in due course. a year from now or 2 years from now, whenever an MP or an MLA wants to make an announcement with the mayor, somebody will come down and tell us there's got to be an election sometime in the future, Mayor.
That's the rumor.
So,
CAO?
yeah, I just, Councilor Feeney, I mean, I completely agree that we have had plenty to substantiate the value of these proposals, and there are former budget amounts, and it wouldn't be difficult for me to use that information to apply. So if council wanted to, pass this motion, but say specifically that staff be directed to apply for these external funding programs to support traffic calming on Kinburn and Claremont streets and the related bypass or cut through from Kinburn to Main Streets at Claremont to access the school. I think I can, put something into Connect to, including a good design buffer with enough opportunity to undertake design work as part of the project, and then result in the, it'll be a little bit weaker in the sense that they will rightly be able to say, hey, we don't really know exactly what's being proposed here, and we don't have permission from NSLC at this time. But that's just a proposed option. It's not the only option, and we have enough information to put an application in. So it's really down to council level confidence to direct staff in this regard. So, if that's the intention, Martha and I will move on it. We just need to get council's direction. So, yeah, I appreciate that. Why pass up the opportunity to apply for money, which probably won't be approved until February based on prior experience, in which case it's not this year's project anyway.
Okay. Councillor Feeney, do I hear a motion?
Yeah, I'd like to make the motion. I think Dylan's illustrated many times that if you, as my mother always says, if it's worth having, it's worth asking for. So I think we should proceed with the request, and so I think there's a motion in the package, and I'm happy to make that motion.
Okay. The motion is in your package. Council directs staff to apply for Connect 2 provincial funding, to also apply to the Federal Active Transportation Fund, the FAT Fund, to improve active transportation infrastructure and active transportation safety within the town of Mahone Bay. Moved by Councillor Feeney. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Wilson? You've heard the motion. On the question, all in favor? Motion is carried. Thank you. Deputy Mayor, you have a question? No? Okay. Before we leave that CAO, if the NSLC agrees to give us the cut through, how does that impact the grant in lieu of taxes we get for the NSLC property?
I don't think there'd be any connection there, because the whole concept of it being in lieu of taxes is that the value of the property being potentially diminished by an easement wouldn't have anything to do with the grant.
Okay, thank you. All righty, let's go to Long Hill Road Culverts. Long Hill Road's a busy street, a lot of development these days. Councillor Feeney.
Mayor, move the council approve the installation of 5 driveway culverts on Long Hill Road at a cost of $10,638.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Carver. Thank you. Moved and seconded. On the question, CAO?
I just wanted to note for the record the appreciation for our new manager of public works and transportation, Jonathan, for putting this report together and for looking at opportunities. We've had a long-standing issue with stormwater on that street, and rather than just responding to calls, he has taken the opportunity to look at the comprehensive picture and come to the conclusion that more work would be needed and make the recommendation. And I'm just really glad to see that. So I just wanted to appreciate that.
Thank you. Okay, you've heard the motion. On the question, all in favor? The motion is carried. Thank you. Let's go to committee reports. The Policy and Strategy Committee of July 26th. I think there's 3 motions in that one. Minimum stand, this has to do with the committee recommends to council. Okay. Minimum standards for housing be reflected in any housing strategy that the town may develop. That council consider reviewing the town logo and request that staff prepare a report on an RFP process to develop a new logo. And the council set the agenda for the September 20, yeah, that's the meeting that's going to be postponed until October. So we'll move that agenda along to October, or would you rather wait till? Okay. So
So-
on the motions,
There's a
Councillor
first
Kerr.
one there. Can I just ask the clerk why the first motion to repeal the dangerous and unsightly buildings bylaw is not highlighted there? Because I noticed the
Oh.
mayor.
I did
was being-
overlook that one.
Okay, so that is meant to, I just wanted to verify that was meant to be one of the motions that is up. And I just noticed, Mr. Mayor, didn't mean to cut you off, but
No,
I
that's
noticed you were
okay.
following our highlights and that one was missing. So I just want to note that's also on the list.
Clerk, is that, that's a
Sure.
legitimate go-to?
Yes, definitely. Human error, my
Okay.
apologies.
Who would make that first motion? Councillor Carver, do we have a seconder? Councillor Burdick, you've heard the motion on the question. All in favor? The motion's carried. That unsightly buildings bylaw is repealed. And I think it was primarily because the wording of the NGA now provides for
Mhm.
whatever that would. Okay. Second motion, who would make that one? Councillor Carver.
So I'll move that minimum standards for housing be reflected in any housing strategy that the town may develop.
Thank you. I think Deputy Mayor, you're seconding that? He is indeed. You've heard the motion. On the question, all in favor? The motion's carried. Thank you. Let's go to the motion on the town logo. Deputy Mayor.
I'd like to move the motion as worded there.
The council consider reviewing the town logo and request that staff prepare a report on an RFP process to develop a new logo for the town of Mahone Bay. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Burdick, you've heard the motion on the question. All in favor? That motion is carried. Thank you. And the motion for the meeting on the 27th, by motion, that meeting is now scheduled for 20 earlier in the week. Clerk,
October 25th.
October 25th, a month later. Are you content to leave the agenda as it is written now, council? It can change if you wish as we get closer. Okay. Good-o. Thank you. Let's go to, well, the bylaw respecting unsightly business was included. It's now gone. The Police Advisory Board report for the July 29th meeting with the RCMP's quarterly report. Does anyone have any questions?
Your worship, I'm sorry, we do not have a motion to approve that agenda for the meeting of the Policy and Strategy Committee that we're now moving to October 25th.
Oh, I thought
And
we
it
did one.
won't come up again if we don't do it now. So I think that's why we wanted to get the motion in.
Okay, Deputy Mayor, he's making that motion. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Carver seconds it. This moves our meeting from the 27th of September to the 25th of October, I think, wasn't it? Yes. Okay. All in favor on the question? All in favor? That motion is carried. Thank you. Any questions on the Police Advisory Board? minutes? No, okay. What about the Lunenburg County Senior Safety Program? Any questions on that, Councillor Carver?
Not a question, it's just comments. Just again, pointing out the the high number of referrals and the comments from the senior safety coordinators that with restrictions lifting, in fact, more problems are kind of surfacing. Various kinds. And I think it sort of parallels the high number of mental health calls that were quoted in the RCMP report. So I'm just letting people know that the issues are increasing. And I also want to point out that at the end of the report where the coordinators refer to their contingency fund, there was a slight discrepancy in the amounts. They suddenly jumped in 1 month from $200 to over $2,000. And that was because there was a donation from the United Way of $2,000 in that period. So just to clarify that, and the United Way has been tremendously supportive of the senior safety program constantly since for over a decade now, and especially during COVID, very, very supportive, recognizing the need and the service that was being provided. And I also just want to point out the very last thing was the helping tree. And I wonder if, I think it would be great if all councillors had that in their possession or had access to it because of the numbers and the information that's available. So I just wondered if anybody wanted to have it printed out and available to them in their mailboxes in the new refurbished town hall, whether that could be done.
Is this document intended to be given to citizens, Councillor Carver, or is it primarily for?
Yes, absolutely. It can be given to citizens. It can be given to, colleagues, organizational agency people. It's a very useful. In fact, we made it available to physicians in the emergency room at the hospital, and they said, "Wow," because they're often faced with situations, and they don't know all the resources that might be available. So it was just a tremendously useful tool.
Clerk, is it possible to put a link on the town's website to this document with the LCSSP, so as they update their document, what our people who choose to access it would see would be updated?
We can put a link on the town website, but we get this from time to time from the Senior Safety Advisory Partnership. We wouldn't have it updated as theirs is updated, but we could put it updated on our website as we get updates.
But if we had a link to their website, whenever they updated their website, what we linked to would be updated.
Yes, I misunderstood. You're asking, could we have a link on our website to the Lunenburg County Senior Safety Partnership?
Yes.
I suppose CAO, I suppose that we'd have to figure out where that goes, but
Okay.
we can work on
Just
that.
a thought.
Yeah.
And it is a good document, I think, Councillor Carver. And that was my thought when I saw it, was that we could get it out there through the media.
Yeah, and have it available, hard copies for people who might be dropping into the into town hall. So it should be widely circulated, I think.
Okay, good idea.
Thank you for that.
Okay, that is all, I think. There's no new business. We've come to the end of our public agenda. We are going to go in camera to discuss two issues under the Municipal Government Act, Section 22(2)A and 22(2)E. Do we have anybody at home still watching us?
We do still have people watching us, but we do not have any questions.
We don't have any questions. Okay. Well, with that, we will say good night to the folks at home, and we will entertain a motion to go in camera. Councillor Wilson, seconded by Councillor Feeney. All in favor? We'll go in camera. We'll a 5-minute break, and then we will reconvene in 5 minutes.